Alright, I'm going to take the gas out of this little engine here. It's pretty badly varnished. I just use a small, like, fish aquarium hose, stick it down in the tank, and what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to put this cap underneath this, and that way you just kind of tilt that tank back to where you get all the fuel to the rear of the, this side of the tank. And hold this thing down in that bottom edge. You can see the fuel coming through the line, so you can get it before it comes in your mouth. There's nothing more disgusting than drinking varnished gas, so it is siphoning into the jug now. I don't know if it shows up in there or not. We'll get this stuff. Smells pretty foul. He said it hadn't been started in 3 years and it's got gas in it. I'm going to pull the carburetor. There's a couple little bolts and one bolt at the bottom of the tank, and this whole assembly and the governor linkage, of course, and this whole assembly will come off. So let me get started here. That is one bolt. This is the other one, and then the third one is right there, but somebody's taken it out and bent that, so I'll straighten that out and put that back together properly. Carburetor's off. Like I say, there's a bolt here, 2 screws here, the governor linkage and the breather hose, but the pickup thing is broke off the bottom of the, supposed to be a little thing similar to that here. So I'm going to run to the mower shop and get new pickup tubes and new tank to carburetor gaskets. And in the meantime, I dumped the varnished gas out of the tank and put lacquer thinner in it to maybe 1/2 inch, because the bottom of the tank had a bunch of crud in it. So I'll just let that sit with lacquer thinner in it, and that'll loosen that and break that up, and then I can clean the tank out, get those pieces on the carburetor. These just push on and off, and that's just pushed into, and I'll get see if I don't have a diaphragm, I'll pick one of them up and get this thing all cleaned out and back on, and the engine should run. Okay, I went and ordered some parts. Actually, I got most of them. This tube here is ordered, but I got that one. I got a new grommet and shut-off valve for that gas tank that was with that generator with the 8-horse set. Both of them leaked, and I'll use that gas tank. I've seen other tubers use tanks to run things, and I thought, that looks like a good idea. Well, this is a decent tank. So I'm going to put a new grommet and valve in it. That's the gasket for between the carb and the tank. I didn't have one, so I had to buy one, and I buy the parts individually. You can get a carb kit for this, but it's like $25. The gasket, the 2 tubes, the gasket for the engine here for the carburetor to block, all came to $9. So I just generally buy what I need. That's the one tube. And it comes with a new little steel retainer ring to hold it on. That's just a little ring. This is just pushed on this. So that will pull right off. This will pull right out. There's supposed to be a screen in there, a little check ball. So that will be this tube, and I'll change that when I get that tube. In the meantime, I can clean the carburetor. Got a new diaphragm. I couldn't find mine. I got a box of them around here somewhere, but they're not very expensive. They're $1 or so, so I just got another one. Alright, I'm disassembling the carburetor. I got these 2 tubes off. Yeah, this guy said this motor run. No, it didn't run. A little check valve in the fuel pump side. So we'll finish cleaning that gasket surface off. You can see where this tube goes on there with that little steel ring holds in that little part right in there. There's a jet in here, so take that out. That's where the adjusting screw goes in. Stick that in some lacquer thinner and make sure those jets are, there's your high and low speed jets in there. Make sure they're all clear too. This is to swirl a fuel air mix. It's like a twisted thing. Make sure that you don't lose that. And I'm going to pull a diaphragm cover so I can replace the diaphragm too. Alright, I got those pieces soaking in my lacquer thinner. This diaphragm cover, after you get all the screws out, you know, there's no place to grip your screwdriver except right here. So that's where you pry up right there. There's the diaphragm, yeah, and that's all hard. So this thing did not run. Save your spring and your little thing there. Make sure you put them back in the correct order. So that's about the bare carburetor, less taking the throttle plate out, which I'm not going to do, or the choke butterfly. So I'm going to finish cleaning this out. You should be able to get gum out to flow through there. That's where the, I don't know if that shows up in there or not, but there's a little hole just inside right there. And just make sure everything's good and clear. Gum out, everything flows through. I'm going to take my razor blade and clean all the gasket off and clean it up in my lacquer thinner a little bit, and then go through it with gum out and blow it out with compressed air and put the parts I have on it. So we got the carburetor all nice and clean. That is the fuel inlet. I'm going to show you what this does. That's a fuel pump right there, and I'll tell you a little about that here in a moment. But make sure and I don't know if these show up in there or not, but there's two little jets down in there. The little ones are idle, the big ones are high speed. Make sure they're clear. They're behind this main jet that screws into the body that your adjusting screw goes into, and that's just soaking in some lacquer thinner there. This is what that screws into that brass piece. I didn't change the setting on this. I took it out just the way it is, so most likely I won't have to readjust the carburetor. This will work just as it is. I wanted to show a little trick with these engines. Okay, as I stated, this is where the fuel pump goes, and it draws fuel through this long tube and squirts it out that opening right there, that elongated opening. So it's drawing the fuel from down in the tank and filling this little bowl right there. And that bowl is what that short tube draws the fuel to make the engine run. So to make these engines so you can start them first pull every time, you either fill a fuel tank right up so the gas overflows into that bowl so the engine can get fuel and it'll start first pull. Or if the fuel is down in the tank, shake the engine enough to where it slashes fuel into that bowl. Engine will start first pull. So that's a big trick with these Briggs and Strattons with this style, with the fuel pump style suction carburetor. The ones that have the shallow tank don't have a fuel pump on the carburetor. They just have one tube that goes into the tank. The engine can draw enough fuel from that tank, but to draw it from the bottom of this tank, it needs that assist fuel pump to get it into that bowl. So all that does is pump fuel from the bottom of the tank into that bowl in the tank for that shorter pickup tube that I took out to draw to make the engine run. So now that this is all clean, make sure your main jet's clean. Make sure you can see light through it and it all appears clean. Then put this back in the carburetor body. Make sure it's snug in there. And you can put your main adjusting screw back in, and again, you don't need to readjust this if the engine was running good when you disassembled it, if it wasn't out of adjustment. Just give that a little snug. That engine should fire first pull when I'm done and not have to readjust the carburetor. I'm going to put the fuel pump assembly in next. So you put your spring in and your little metal doohickey on top of the spring so it doesn't damage the diaphragm. The diaphragm only fits one way, so make sure you put it on the right way. Put your little cover in, and then put your screws in, and you got a diaphragm installed. So all I need is that long or that short tube, and this thing could go back together. That's the part number to the diaphragm. So if you need it, if you want to find one on eBay or something, you need the part number, check that out. Got the gas tank all cleaned up. Well, the parts came in for the water pump. So this is a 3-horse Briggs Stratton pulse jet carburetor, and I had to replace both these tubes. So this is the part number for this tube, and this is the part number for this tube. Now to install these can be a little bit of a nightmare to get on, but there's a trick. I mean, what I do is I make sure that there's no burrs on the tip of this brass tube. I sand it and, you know, run my fingers around it, make sure it's nice and smooth. Then I take this plastic tube and I boil up a little pan of water on the stove, and I hold the bottom inch or so in that roaring boiling water until it, you know, lets it soften it, and then I put this little steel ring on it and push it onto the tube as much as I can, set it on my block of wood, and by holding the tube I tap lightly with a small hammer, not a big one, until it goes on all the way. This tube I essentially do the same thing. This has got, like, it almost looks threaded, but it's like burrs in there. So what I do is I heat this in boiling water too. And another thing, I put a drop of oil on this brass tube before I push this on, and I put a drop of oil down into where this tube pushes in. It just helps the nylon slide in easier. Sorry, the furnace came on. We'll move over here. Not that it's going to make a lot of difference. But anyway, the tube, I do the same with this. I heat it in a roaring boil. Now this one you'll want to use a pair of needle nose or some type of pliers to hold it. And then I push it in there as hard as I can. And then I take my same little hammer with this on a block of wood and tap it down in there. And then I take my pliers I was holding with and kind of turn it down in until you can feel it like bottom. It's kind of a, you might break a tube or two on your first attempt on these, so if you've never done one of these, don't be surprised if you have to go buy another one. I've done lots of these, so generally I don't break them. Sometimes you split this tube going over, especially if you don't have that little clamp in place. You got to put that little clamp on the tube where it belongs before you start pushing it. You'll never get it up this tube and onto that nylon, so it's important you put that little clamp on before you start trying to push this on. Once you start pushing it over that will expand the end out to where that clamp won't fall down. You've got to have it in place. So we got this carburetor together. It's got a new diaphragm in it, new pickup tubes, and I have the gasket. So we're going to put this engine together, and hopefully it'll be ready to go. I put a new spark plug in it, and it has good spark. I drained the oil out and put new oil in it. I got to figure out some way to get water to the water pump. I don't want to run it dry. I just don't want to take a chance on damaging it. So it's kind of cold out, so it may be a while before I can crank it up and run it. But it should start first pull when I'm done. This is the part number for the gasket that goes here. Some of the older engines, this is a fairly thick gasket. Some of the older engines use 2 gaskets here. So if you have one of the older Briggs Strattons, make sure you get 2, because 2 go on there. Another thing I like to do is these screws, as you can see, have a flat, unthreaded little end. I like to push them through the gasket. It just holds the gasket in place. Don't forget your little bracket for the breather. That goes on this side over here. I already put the breather tube somewhat in place. So get it ready to put on the tank. I just wanted to show that that does make it easier to keep things in place if you put the screws through like that, and then you can just push them through and start them. Okay, I got the carburetor reinstalled to the fuel tank. I straightened that up where it was bent so I can bolt it back to there. It's important you do that. Keep that tank bolted on the bottom. So we're ready to throw this assembly back on the water pump. Make sure that that doesn't fall out when you've been working on it. That's what makes the fuel air mix swirl, and it makes the engine breathe a little better. Alright, it's all back on. The governor spring hooks to this. It's a constant speed engine. The governor, you check to make sure everything moves, choke works, bolts in down here. So it's pretty much all together, and we'll throw the air cleaner on it. And there's no reason it shouldn't start on the first pull and run good. I did not change that adjusting screw, but when I will start it and adjust it once we get a little more climate weather, and I'll figure out how to. I don't have hoses for the pump, so I guess I'm going to have to take like a plastic bin and cut a hole for the intake and just let that discharge back into the bin. I don't know. Might have to put something there to deflect it down depending on how far it shoots water, but no reason this engine shouldn't start in 1 or 2 pulls. It's all rebuilt carburetor, new plug. It has good spark, good compression, so I'm 99.9% sure we got a good water pump there. Alright, it's 100% finished other than a test run. Keep your eye on my videos, and we'll crank this up in the future and see how it runs and pumps. And we'll do that video for a Craigslist ad. Again, if you enjoy my videos, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching.